This is the lecture for Nancy Fraser's Rethinking Recognition. So, first topic, the ideal culturalist versus the ideal redistributionist. So, Fraser is kind of the opposite viewpoint of Young. So, we've read Young already, and Young is kind of defending something that we might call identity politics, which is the importance of uh, recognizing various identities at the sort of government level, so including various identities in democratic deliberation in various sorts of ways. So that is what Young is in favor of. And then Fraser is kind of opposed to this sort of thing. And the labels we're going to use for that are culturalist versus redistributionist. So Fraser is against culturalists. Culturalists are people who think that culture is relevant in the way that we need to include group identities in deliberation, and redistributionists are focused on something else. But the first, what I want to set out is the culturalist versus redistributionist debate at a sort of higher level, which is the way Fraser is introducing it here. So before we get to the identity politics debate, basically, which is what Young was talking about last week, Fraser thinks we have a more fundamental kind of debate between culturalists and redistributionists. A culturalist is somebody who thinks the sort of central problem in society is kind of cultural attitudes or cultural, yeah, attitudes is good enough. It's sort of like the culture, and sort of the way society works is based on what kind of culture it has. And so if you want to fix a problem in society, what you want to do is change the culture of society. So, for instance, if you have sexism in society, the culturalist will say the problem is that you have a sexist culture, and the fix is to get people somehow to stop being sexist. And once people stop being sexist, that will change the culture, and then that will fix the problem. So that is the culturalist kind of viewpoint. And then the redistributionist says, no, the problem in society is that you have basically unequal, like, economic resources effectively. So, different people in society have less than other people in society. So, for instance, women in society have less money, worse jobs, things like this, worse healthcare, things like this, than men. And so that is the problem. And the way you fix that is by, redistributing things so that women have just as much as men, or more even. Maybe that's the fix. So that's the redistributionist thought. And so there are lots of ways to be a culturalist and lots of ways to be a redistributionist. So the redistributionist view I just described, you could be a redistributionist sort of socialist or communist. You say everybody needs to sort of have equal, because, like, everything should sort of belong to society and it should be distributed to each individual equally. That's the sort of socialist or communist picture. You could be a redistributionist and be a kind of capitalist. You say, well, capitalism is good because as long as it's functioning correctly, everybody sort of earns as much as they deserve. And so nobody gets less or more just based on their, race or gender or caste or something like this. So there's lots of ways to be a redistributionist, and lots of ways to be a culturalist. What we want to have in mind so that we understand what Fraser is talking about here is sort of like what the debate is really about. So I have here shared concerns, and then specifically, it's important not to sort of misunderstand the culturalist versus redistributionist debate and imagine that the culturalist sort of does not care about different amounts of, I shouldn't just say economics. Um, okay, well, so we don't want to misunderstand the debate and say that the culturalist doesn't care about unequal resource distribution. So the culturalist only cares about, like, the fact that people in society are sexist. They don't care about the fact that women have less than men. No, no, no. Really, the culturalist who doesn't like sexism is going to say it's very bad that women have less economic resources than men. And in fact, the reason women have less economic resources than men is that we have a sexist culture. The sexist culture is causing men to earn more and women to earn less. Like that's part of the reason why the culture is bad. That's not the only reason the culture is bad. There are non-economic reasons the culture is bad. But, like, the culturalist says, of course I care about economics. And then of course the redistributionist cares about economics too. That's their sort of central concern. And then similarly, both care about the culture. So the culturalist obviously cares about the culture. They want the culture not to be sort of unjust. They want to have a just culture. But then the redistributionist doesn't say like I don't care what kind of culture a society has, because of course it's ridiculous to imagine a society with a super duper sexist culture, but that sort of has completely equal economic distribution. Like how would that even work? Like that's never happened in human society. So everybody agrees that sort of economics and culture are sort of two very important factors, and that we want to sort of fix these things if we want to fix injustice in society. The disagreement is basically about how to fix these things, sort of what order to fix these things. And then another way to think about it is like what sort of tactics to pursue. So how to fix these things, the culturalist will say the central way to fix things is to fix the culture. So you need to sort of change what people think. Maybe you can educate them to think things different. Maybe there's other ways to make people think different things. But whatever you do, you need to change the culture, and the economics will follow. So you can't just redistribute money to people. If you keep the sexist attitudes, the money redistribution is only going to go so far, or it will get undone, or something like that. You must change the sexist attitudes, and then the money will sort itself out. Like you don't need to set up like a socialist utopia or something. You need to get the culture fixed, and then the money solves itself. And then the redistributionist is sort of going in the other direction. They say, look, of course I want to fix the culture, but you can't fix the culture without fixing the way the economy works. The culture and the economy are intertwined. And specifically, the economy leads to the culture. So this is the classic Marxist analysis of things like caste and class and race and so on. Like they think it's the economy that determines these sorts of divisions in society. And so what you need to do is you fix the economy, you make everybody equal sort of economically, and then these other cultural divisions will go away because people will no longer need to be divided up, or it will no longer make sense to divide people up along these lines once we have achieved economic equality. And so it's sort of what's more important to fix. And then specifically when it comes to tactics, like how are we going to fix these sorts of things? One particular tactic that the culturalist will often be attracted to is what we might call identity politics, which is, look, if we want to fix the culture, one way of fixing the culture is to sort of like advance the sorts of concerns that have been up until this point excluded from the culture or denigrated in the culture, and get these sorts of concerns into the public view and change the culture with respect to these sorts of things. So if we want to fix sexism, maybe women band together and speak out about sexism and fight back against sexism in ways that change the culture, and sort of do this as a specific identity group, as women, and this will help change things, and so on and so forth for all the different oppressed groups. The culturalist thinks, great, this is a way to fix things. And then the redistributionist thinks, no, actually, this is going to be bad in a lot of ways. And then specifically the ways in which it's going to be bad are what this article by Fraser is about. So I said Fraser is sort of a redistributionist, and then Young is kind of a culturalist. And so broadly speaking, that's the kind of shape of the debate. Fraser is saying we should be redistributionists. Why? Because, well, a lot of reasons, but like a lot of what she's going to talk about is how the tactics of the culturalist she thinks are going to have bad sort of effects, or they're not going to work, or things like that. So that's the disagreement. But again, you never want to lose sight that everybody in this debate sort of cares about economics and cares about culture. It's not like Fraser doesn't care if people have sexist attitudes. Of course she cares if people have sexist attitudes, but she thinks the fix is to sort of fix things economically, and the attitudes will sort themselves out. And similarly, Young and other culturalists, it's not like they don't care about economics. It's not like they don't want to equally distribute wealth or something. They just think, no, fix the culture, and then this will fix the wealth distribution. And I just said Young thinks this stuff, but then the next topic is Young, culturalist or synthesis. So you might have noticed when you were reading Young, she has a footnote where she says, you know, my views on this topic have been informed by some stuff that Fraser wrote, and she cites some earlier things that Fraser wrote. And so Young, in the thing we read last week, takes herself to be sort of answering all of the concerns Fraser is raising here. So maybe we're reading this in the wrong order, but like Young sort of thinks she has solved all the problems that Fraser is bringing up in this article. And so that's one thing to think about. And a second thing, like number one, has Jung already solved all these objections that Fraser raises? And number two, if Jung has solved them, or even if she hasn't, I don't know, whatever, is Jung, I don't know, really like a sort of culturalist in the sense that Fraser has in mind? Or is Jung kind of like a mix between Fraser's view, the redistributionist, and the culturalist? So is Jung sort of combining the best of both worlds? This is good to think about just because we want to understand Jung. It's also good because, as you'll see in the next reading, we have another sort of approach to sort of combining these things, which looks different from Jung. And so, um, yeah, it's worth thinking about sort of how culturalist is Jung and why or why not.